There's a question that film historians, critics, and obsessive moviegoers have been arguing about for decades. What was the single greatest year in the history of cinema? Some would say 1939, Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, Stagecoach, all in the same 12 months. Others will make a case for 1999, The Matrix, Fight Club, The Sixth Sense, Magnolia. And those are fair arguments. But there's one year where the debate essentially ends. One year so absurdly, almost offensively stacked with masterpieces that it feels less like a point in time and more like a deliberate act of cultural conspiracy. And that year is 1994. This isn't just a list video, because honestly, just listing the films would be enough to make the case. The Lion King, Forrest Gump, Pulp Fiction, The Shawshank Redemption, Speed, Leon the Professional, Natural Born Killers, Clerks, Dumb and Dumber, True Lies, Jim Carrey releasing Ace Ventura and The Mask in the same year. I could keep going. What I actually want to explore is the deeper question. Why 1994? What was happening in the culture and in the industry that caused this particular 12-month window to produce such a concentration of genuinely great cinema? Because I don't think it was an accident. The early 90s were a transitional moment in Hollywood. The blockbuster era of the 80s, built on Spielberg and Lucas and effects-driven spectacle, was beginning to exhaust itself. At the same time, something was bubbling up from the margins. Independent cinema was finding a real commercial foothold. Richard Linklater had made Slacker in 1991 for $23,000. Reservoir Dogs hit Sundance in 1992 and caused a minor earthquake. The infrastructure for something new, smaller budgets, bolder voices, more personal storytelling was quietly falling into place. And then 1994 happened, and all of that potential detonated simultaneously. The result was a year that somehow managed to deliver both the biggest crowd pleasers imaginable and the most challenging independent films of the decade in the same calendar year on the same screens. That tension between the mainstream and the margins is really what makes 1994 so extraordinary. It's probably impossible to talk about 1994 without starting with Pulp Fiction. Quentin Tarantino's second feature premiered at Cannes on May 23, 1994, at a screening that most people in the room weren't sure what to make of. The audience was polarized almost immediately. And then, with jury president Clint Eastwood presiding, the Palme d'Or went to an $8.5 million American film about hitmen discussing fast food and a briefcase that glows. Tarantino gave the finger to a protester in the crowd and accepted the award. It was a perfectly on-brand moment for a film that was, in essence, one long act of cheerful provocation. What Pulp Fiction did to cinema is genuinely difficult to overstate. It took non-linear storytelling and made it feel thrilling. It gave dialogue permission to go nowhere, to digress endlessly. It proved that a film could be simultaneously trashy and sophisticated, violent and funny, referential and completely original. Pulp Fiction didn't just win a prize, it rewrote the grammar of independent cinema practically overnight. And it made $213 million on an $8.5 million budget, just so we're clear on what artistic integrity can look like when it's also commercially unstoppable. But here's the detail that tells you everything about how abundant 1994 was. On October 14th, Pulp Fiction opened wide and shot immediately to #1. And on that exact same Friday, a quiet prison drama called The Shawshank Redemption expanded into wide release. It finished 9th for the weekend. The film barely made back its $25 million budget during its entire theatrical run. Stephen King later admitted even he thought the title was part of the problem. Audiences kept calling it Shimmy Shimmy Shake and the Scrimshaw Reduction. And now, The Shawshank Redemption sits at #1 on IMDb's all-time rankings, voted there continuously by millions of people who discovered it on VHS or cable, because it became the most rented movie of 1995, after 7 Oscar nominations prompted a re-release, after Ted Turner acquired the broadcast rights for practically nothing. A film so good it couldn't be killed by a terrible opening weekend, a confusing title, and the simultaneous release of the most culturally electric film of the decade. At its core, it's one of the great friendship stories in American cinema. The bond between Andy Dufresne's and Red is built on such a specific quality of mutual recognition that it functions almost as a philosophical argument that the deepest human connection is forged between people who see each other clearly inside brutalizing circumstances and choose anyway to extend hope.
Meanwhile, Forrest Gump was grossing over $678 million worldwide and taking home the Best Picture Oscar. Robert Zemeckis' film uses a man with a low IQ as an innocent witness to 30 years of American history, from Elvis to Vietnam to Watergate to AIDS, letting audiences process enormous national traumas through the protective distance of Forrest's perpetual unknowing. It is sentimental, unapologetically so. And here's the strange irony at the heart of the 1994 Oscars. Pulp Fiction was nominated for Best Picture and lost. The Shawshank Redemption received 7 nominations and went home empty-handed. In a normal year, either film might have won. In 1994, they were both on the ballot and neither won. That's not a failure of judgment. It's evidence of a historical abundance so unusual that the conventional systems of recognition simply couldn't accommodate it. And then there are the films that didn't even make the Best Picture conversation. Leon, the Professional, introduced 12-year-old Natalie Portman alongside Jean Reno's career-defining performance, a film of strange, uncomfortable tenderness, more emotionally precise than its violent premise suggests. Speed gave Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock genuine stardom through an action premise so elegantly simple it barely needed a second act. Kevin Smith shot Clerks on credit cards in the convenience store where he worked, mostly at night after his shift ended, and turned it into one of the foundational texts of American independent cinema. And Jim Carrey, It Still Requires Acknowledgement, released Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber in a single calendar year, establishing a physical comedy style so completely his own that critics reached back to Buster Keaton for comparison. So what explains it? Why 1994? The conditions were right, a transitional industry moment, an independent infrastructure finally maturing, a generation of filmmakers who had spent years absorbing everything and were now ready to put it all on screen. Tarantino had clerked at a video store. Darabont had been writing adaptations for a decade waiting for his shot. Kevin Smith had maxed out his credit cards. All of that creative pressure built up across years, released into the same 12-month window. That's what 1994 was, an entire year of cinema that took the question of hope seriously. And 30 years later, those films are still being watched, argued about, and discovered by people who find them on a streaming service at 2 in the morning and can't look away. There are great years in cinema, and then there is 1994, and nothing will ever quite convince me they're the same thing.